Hello, geeks and thespians. Welcome back to another DragonCon Theater and Performing Arts Lovers unofficial panel. Today we are talking about harmony behind the curtain, nurturing your mental wellness in the performing arts. Um,
Sorry, it's my
Silence
mother.
cell phones now. No big deal. Um, we are joined here by a lot of amazing panelists, and I would love if each of you would introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, your background in the performing arts. Jim, we're going to start with you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Davis, and my day job, excuse me, I'm an associate professor of theater and performance studies at Kennesaw State University, right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And thank you, Atlanta. Atlanta is the greatest city in the world. We know that. And I teach theater history, and I teach our general education class, and I direct plays. I do all that fun stuff. Prior to that, I was a professional actor and director and dramaturg here in Atlanta, worked some in Chicago, and also have a background in puppet theater too.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Fairy Godmother, tell us all about you.
Hi, I am Jennifer Franson, or Fairy Godmother. I have been a lot of things in my time, but theater related, I have been a costume designer for a couple of different theaters. I work for Club Med and SeaWorld. I do commissions. I was in a Dragon Con Page to Stage costume contest last year and had an amazing time. That was wonderful. I will be helping out at AFO this summer. That's like the third weekend in June. I'm going to help run their cosplay or hospital so they can have some cosplay repair set up, and I'll be helping with that. And currently, I'm working with the Surrey Arts Council in Mount Airy. I help out at the Andy Griffith Museum and the Amphitheater and the Earl Theater, and I'm just like loving life.
Definitely. Well, that all sounds awesome. How about you, Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alyssa Jackson, pronouns she, her. I have been doing theater since middle school, acting, dancing, all of that. I also minored in theater at University of Georgia, go Bulldogs. I also then owned my own theater company for almost 10 years in the Atlanta area called North Fulton Drama Club. We did Shakespeare outdoors. It was so fun. And so was there director, producer, costume designer, fill-in actor if anything ever happened. I'm also sort of an actor, costume designer, director about town in Atlanta currently. So very excited to be a part of this panel.
Definitely. How about you, Rick?
Hi, I'm Rick Tatro. I have been a stagehand, electrician, carpenter, spot op, technical director since about the early 80s. I am currently the stagecraft teacher and technical director for the Eckerd College Theater Department in St. Pete, Florida.
Oh, wow.
And I'm happy to be here tonight.
Definitely. And Mama Yoda.
I'm Jody
Tell us all
Keeley.
about
My con name is Mama Yoda. I have been doing theater since I was 8 years old. I am currently just started up a new fine arts academy in the Gainesville, Georgia area called Key Harmonics. Just started up actually this week. We're going to be specializing in mostly in dinner theater. And I'm the founder and managing editor of Speakeasy Entertainment Review and Promotion, which is we are a review and promotion of theater and entertainment in the Atlanta area and beyond. And so it's speakeasy.com if you want to look that up. You'll see a lot of articles and things. We also are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all the things. So, and I was a teacher. I'm retired-ish now. But I founded the Spartan Performing Arts Academy at West Hall Middle School in Hall County, Georgia.
Definitely.
Impressive.
All Definitely. Now, the way I'm going to do it today, normally I just kind of pick people and randomly add them. But what I'm going to do this time is we're just going to kind of go in order. So that means, Jim, I'm going to pick on you first. My first question is, what mental health challenges are most prevalent in the performing arts industry in your experience?
Boy, that's a big question, and
I know.
I'm just gonna run into it headlong. I can think of a couple off the top of my head. Obviously, stress and
Hmm.
burnout. Everybody knows that you know 10 of 12 rehearsals and rehearsal every night and all of that stuff is really difficult if you have the resources and support that people deserve, but a lot of people don't have those resources and that support, and that makes it just untenable. Things like childcare and things, transportation, just kind of nuts and bolts things makes doing theater really hard, just on top
Hmm.
of the stress that is normally there. So I
Hmm.
think that's a big one. That's a ginormous mental health issue. I think another one, and this is a thing I think about a lot because a lot of my work at Kennesaw State focuses on first year students and helping them become be successful. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in the past few years is this identity, or this idea of identity, of how
Hmm.
like I said, I'm kind of viewing it through the lens of these first year theater students. But I think it's true across the board, community theater or Broadway or whatever. Uh, People who do what we do think about this as really a piece of our identity, that we are theater artists. These high school students and first year theater majors, they call themselves theater kids, and that's awesome,
Hmm.
that's cool. But then I think about my son, my youngest son, just finished up his first year of college, and he's a finance major. Now, how I
Hmm.
ended up with a finance major, this is a great mystery, and I don't understand it. But he doesn't. I always refer to him as the most normal kid in America. He does not have that part of his brain that's broken, and I mean that in a loving way for all of us. But he does not identify as a finance kid. And people who do history or something like that aren't history kids or biology kids. What we do is a really big part of our identity. And kind of navigating that is really difficult for a lot of folks, whether you are an 18-year-old first year theater major or a grown up. Uh, and then obviously, I'm sure a recurring theme tonight is dealing with disappointment. And so how do you do
Hmm.
that? And everyone nods knowingly. Uh, yeah, and how do you handle that? You prepare for the audition, and you understand intellectually that you don't get most of them, but still, you're going to be disappointed. But I think it's doubly so because, like I said, this is a chunk of our identity. So being able to kind of navigate that is tricky too. So, like I said, those are kind of the two things that are, sort of off the top of my head.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Now, Jen, what do you think? Do you have anything to add on that?
Yes. So I've been thinking about this panel since we just started discussing it, and there's a lot of different ways that I can do it, but I'm gonna be the costumer, the costume designer on this because
Mm.
I want to kind of address the professionals' responsibility and mental health.
Mhm.
And costuming has a huge role to play in that. And I came into costuming from a loving Halloween and being an actress and singing, and them never being able to have a costume big enough for me. So I
Mhm.
learned how to sew um, for the theater because I had to for myself. If I wanted to look good on that stage, I was going to have to take in my own appearance into hands because none of the costume designers were prepared to work with anything above like a size 12. And I
Mhm.
was most definitely above a size 12. I still am. But I took great pride in the fact that all of the shows I costumed, every person I put on that stage, regardless if they were a 2 or a 22 or a 32, I made sure they felt and looked good in that costume. And it's on the professional to be willing to deal with real people. I mean, I think it's you go through fashion college and come into it from that angle. You're used to dealing with the size 6 as your like standard. That's not what you're going to get into when you get out into theater in the real world. And some of these costumers that I've followed in their footsteps have devastated devastated the egos of some of these beautiful artistic ladies and men, and just they will silence their voice forever with one harsh comment. And you've got to be responsible for the effect you have on others if you're working backstage with such a beautiful, creative, and fragile mentally
Mhm.
population. So that's where I'm coming from on this panel tonight. Is the theater professionals have to take responsibility for their part in the mental health of the actors as well.
Definitely, definitely. I 100% agree with that. And as a person of size, I feel you. I wish I would have had more people do that for me. Alyssa, what do you think? I know you put up a
Yeah,
comment here.
yes. Responding to Jim's, I
Yeah.
mean, especially as like a young person, just just being devastated. Yeah, it is emotional. And I kind of wanted to build on that and what Jen was saying. When I ran my theater company, that was what opened up my eyes. Like, I know that myself, as I had really primarily been an actor up until that point,
Mhm.
but then suddenly I'm responsible for the well-being of the 15 to 20 people who are in my cast. And one of the things that we decided, we were trying to kind of build a different type of theater company. It was trying to
Mhm.
be not cliquish, like really open. And the joke behind our name was, we were coming off of one of my co-creators was coming from a theater company that had been wild, like super cliquish. They got shut down for spending money that they had been given for sets on pot. Like, it was just a drama, nothing but drama. So we were like, we're going to make our own theater company and we're going to call it Drama Club. And the first rule of Drama Club is there's no drama in Drama Club. And the second rule of Drama Club is there's no drama in Drama Club. Um, what you learn very quickly is there's always drama in Drama Club, because the people that are attracted to theater, I
Mhm.
think I always, something I've thought about a lot is like, to be
Cat?
a theater, an actor
No,
especially.
sorry.
Hello, cat.
She was
Mine are clawing the doors.
she was trying to claw my leg, and I'm like, nope, off.
Um, but yeah, so like the thing that I say this from a place of honesty, like I think a lot of us who are attracted to theater are because we are very emotional people. Like, you kind of have to tap into that, especially to be an actor. That's part of being vulnerable and being in a space where you're trying to take on another persona. There is a vulnerability to it.
Mhm.
So the way we ended up taking that concept was, this is a safe space for you to come and leave everything else at the door, and you can come and be and play and be vulnerable and make choices. If there is an issue, you bring it to us, we will help you solve it, but it doesn't come into the greater cast.
Mhm.
And we had like, overall, that's not always going to be possible, but that was sort of the place we led from. And I have had a lot of people come to us and say, like, that was one of the few places I worked where I felt heard. I felt like my perspective was honored. And that was a huge point of pride for me when we, as running a successful company for that long.
Mhm. Definitely. And I totally agree that sometimes with drama, as in the theater, drama comes hand in hand. So I love it. I love the geeky reference, like the Fight Club reference. That's awesome. All right. I gotta unmute you, Rick. Hold on. Okay. Rick, what about you? What have you experienced?
Well, I've been doing tech theater since like 1981 or maybe even 1979. I don't like to think about it too much, but
Oh, I
you know,
understand. Mm,
that's going back to I don't know if that's pre OSHA, but it's certainly back when OSHA wasn't paying too much attention to what we were doing. Uh,
mm,
and there has always been a machismo in on the tech side, and it really doesn't matter what gender the person doing it is. I remember sitting around on 72-hour changeovers and people bragging about how long they'd gone without sleep.
mm,
uh, you know we as technicians have to get the show up by opening, no matter how many of us survive to make it. um, and there was always like an unspoken, well, sometimes not always unspoken, ridicule of anyone who just couldn't make it, who
mm,
wouldn't live up to it. And burnout, on the tech side, I don't in any way doubt that actors have it too, big
oh
time.
yeah.
We all face it, but I don't know of any job that I've ever had that was as unrelenting as doing, professional technical, well, not even just professional. We have to get that show up, and we have
Mm,
so much time to do it. We used to do 72-hour changeovers at a theater I worked at, and there was one night it was like 3 a.m. and I was up on a ladder taking down a false proscenium, and another guy was unloading one of the fly rails, one of the battens, and he didn't pay attention because he was so tired, and he knocked the lock open, and an empty pipe that was out of weight came shooting down, missed me by 6 inches.
mm,
I was like, haha, that would have been funny if it hit me. And then, like, it took a few minutes because I was exhausted too to sink in what just happened. And I went, you know what? I'm going to go take a nap under one of the dressing room tables, and went into one of the dressing
yeah.
rooms and took a nap. Um, I have seen a great deal of progress over the years of moving away from that, moving away from the
Mhm,
all night strike, from the working until you drop and then getting up again after taking 5 minutes of sleep to try to get this done, because it's become it was so dangerous. But
mhm.
for a long time nobody paid attention to that, nobody worried about it, and ridiculed anyone that couldn't cut it.
Couldn't cut it. Yeah,
Yeah. and,
definitely.
and that's a big, it's still a big problem on the tech side. And it's getting better, but it's still not by any chance gone.
Definitely. Well, Jody, I'm unmuting you. I'm
Hey,
not
guys,
good at
I get
muting and
I
unmuting
get to
people.
piggyback off everyone, but wanted to say, sorry about my shifting around. I broke my ankle today, and so I was trying to get comfortable. Um,
Do what you need to
going
do.
from what everyone said, starting with Jim, yes, theater is a huge part of our identity, and so and I think that people who are neurodivergent tend to have mental health issues are the ones that gravitate toward theater as well, because we feel seen, we feel heard, we feel home. Costumes that fit, coming from a children's theater perspective, which is where I come from. Um, I just did Matilda with Heather Wayne Performing Arts, and we have larger girls in the cast. And whenever you're doing children's theater, the type is size 1. And I said, I'm going home to my closet. I'm going to find things for you girls to wear. And so it's
Mhm,
nice because I'm a size 12, 14. I can fit those girls that are bigger. And I always, when I'm doing children, give them 4 options. Here are your 4 costume choices. Which one do you like the best? Because I want them to feel happy and comfortable in what they're in. My costumer is very young. She's 19. She would put a costume on and say, "Hey, Jody, what do you think?" And I'd say, "Did you give them a choice?" And if they didn't like it, I'd make her go back and give them a choice.
mhm,
Rejection, that's tough. Now with Heather Wayne, we did something new with Matilda. We had the kids record themselves looking at the cast list. And
Mhm.
then we put that up on our social media. And
Mhm.
they did a good job, even if they weren't happy with their part, but I think they all were. And the excitement for the others in the troop. So building that camaraderie among especially children is so important. And you can do that with your older people too. Let's see, machismo on the tech side. I've done tech, and I understand what you're saying. The Preacher's Wife is opening, premiering in Atlanta at the Alliance Theater. Music by Titus Burgess. It was set to open Saturday night. They canceled because they weren't ready tech wise. I did not get the notice. I drove all the way from Gainesville into the Alliance, saw the sign up on the box office wall. They are
Mhm.
pushing it to Wednesday night for previews. And if they're not ready, they're going to keep pushing it until they feel they're ready. So things are happening that are better
Mhm.
than they used to be. Let's see. And I think that COVID did that. With COVID, we were like, the show must go on. No, the show can't go on. Okay, let's not make the show go on if the show's not ready to go on. And
Right.
then finally, what I said, and this is what I'm going to bring: children, children's theater. Children gravitate toward theater, and most of them do have mental health problems. My troop at Spartan Performing Arts Academy, I have girls that are cutters that have been in the hospital. I have children with disabilities. I have children with anxiety, major anxiety disorders, PTSD.
Mhm.
They come to theater because it's a place where they can be somebody else, where they can
Mhm.
feel at home, where they can play. And what my principal had said to me was, I'm so glad that we have this at our school because these kids need it. There's a place where these kids need to be, where these kids can fit. And I think we all know that. We've all felt that.
Mhm.
And we've all seen that. So
Definitely.
that's all I can think of right now.
Definitely. Well, my next question, I'm going to start with you, Jen, and then we're going to go around again, is what role does leadership play in promoting mental wellness in theater companies or theater troops? Um,
It's pivotal. I mean, everything starts from the top down. How the director treats his heads of each of the different departments is going to be reflected in how he treats and how they treat the people that are working for them. And it goes, I mean, for costuming, if you don't have a big enough budget and you have a very diverse body size group, that's going to
mhm.
make it more challenging. And I mean, and you have to start with the whole attitude of we are doing this because we love it and we want to have fun. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of times management forgets that. And it becomes about we've got to fill the seats, we've got to sell the tickets, we've got to get pretty faces. And we will cast Johnny in this role because we know that if we cast Johnny, we will get all of Johnny's friends and family, and that's half the county. And so
Mhm.
maybe Johnny, and this happens a lot. I've seen this in community theater. Sometimes Johnny is really talented and actually deserves it,
Mhm.
but most of the time they don't. And then
Mhm.
you have a young man who has been convinced he's all that in a bag of chips. And he goes
Mhm.
somewhere professional and he gets in front of somebody who doesn't have all the familiar support that he had, and that's going to break him. I've seen too
Mhm.
many bright and beautiful babies get broken at that transition between local theater and something bigger because the casting is favoring a certain look or a certain statistic over the joy. The joy gets lost in the finance of it. And that has to it. I mean, we need the accountants. Thank God Jim has a son who's accountant. We need finance people, but we need finance people who love theater. So you're doing it right, Jim. You're raising the right thing. I Hey, go Jim's sons. um but I mean, leadership, we have the responsibility. I mean, if as a director you talk down to your staff, that's going to echo down to every person that gets in that building and on that stage. And I love
Mhm.
working with directors who just talk. I've had the chance to work with some truly amazing directors, and I've been very lucky that I have consciously avoided a few choices that would have put me in a different situation. And I
Mhm.
But I've seen the power that one person with the right heart in a position of authority, it can echo out like a star into the whole community, just lights up the whole community. But you get one bad person in there and it can shut that whole community dark.
Hmm.
And that's
Definitely.
that's management's responsibility towards mental health in their community.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Well, Alyssa, what do you think? And I gotta unmute you. It didn't unlet. Okay, you've muted yourself, so it won't let me unmute you.
Sorry. Uh, yeah, I feel like I kind of touched on this, previously as, us setting
Mhm.
like as producers, directors, setting the tone for the theater of like making it known that it's a safe space. But I think it's also about um, being aware, like, and I think, Jen, you were kind of talking about this, like, of making sure that mental health is a priority and speaking that and acting to it. So like I think one side is checking in on vulnerable people and making sure that they're okay because there's,
Definitely.
you're always going to have high strung anxiety, that kind of thing is going to happen. But I think there's also addressing problematic behavior. And I know this is getting sort of into a slightly different area, but it
Mhm.
is, I think, a piece of mental health. It's like if you have somebody who's bullying, or if they're being, a diva, or if they're if they're directing other people on stage. How many times have I dealt with that? An actor directing their fellow actors,
Mhm.
shutting down that behavior and saying, no, this is not what we do here, and maintaining that standard of behavior, I think is really key. And I think another
Mhm.
piece of it, something, again, not to say that we were like the shining example of the best theater in the world, but it was just kind of some things that we did based on things we had experienced at other theaters. We tried to be really, really cognizant about when we built our calendar. So like
Mhm.
having people give us their time commitments up front, trying to like do rehearsals, group them together. So like people were with like, and you weren't, if you were there, we might be skipping all over the place, but you're going to be making the most of your time. When I was at Georgia and I did a main stage production, you were expected, no matter what your role was in that cast, you had to be at rehearsal every single day. So half of the time, if you're like in an ensemble role, you're sitting in the audience seats, just hanging out, wasting your time. And especially as a college student, when you're trying to do your homework, you're trying to keep up with classes. It was, and I was doing a musical, so it was really intense. Um,
Mhm.
and that was really, and I saw my other castmates, like I was not a theater major, I was a theater minor, but it was like, I have other work to do. Like, but you've opened this to non-theater people. But even those loads are still big. You still have
Mhm.
intense classwork. You might not even be doing theater work. So anyway, that I think um management being cognizant of people's time and being um uh uh there's a word my brain has flipped off. I'm in my
It's
40s.
okay.
Um, this is what happens to me now. Being sensitive and thinking about honoring people's time and how that can
Definitely.
affect their mental health, I think is part of it.
Definitely. Definitely. I like everything you just said. And totally agree. How about you, Rick? What do you think leadership has to add
Oh,
to
it's
this
everything.
conversation?
It's everything in on the tech side, and on in front of the curtain too. But my
Mhm.
perspective is from backstage, so I
Mhm.
don't want to. I just hope I don't sound like I'm minimizing anything
No,
from.
you don't. No, and I love that you have like that behind the black box type of thought because a lot of time we talk as actors but not as crew. So,
Well, I started early enough or long enough ago enough that I came up through the we work until it's done. And we work
mhm,
until we can't work anymore until we fall. I've been to the hospital because of that more than one occasion, um, and that was just the way we did things. And then I had a boss. His name was Norm Miller, who was just one of the most amazing men I've ever worked for. Uh,
mhm,
I was his ATD. He was the tech director of the school where I went to school and as an undergrad, and then I went back and I worked for him for several years. And he was just so um he always got the show always got done, but he was
Mhm.
like, you know what, guys, it's time to go home.
Yeah.
We will do this. We will pick this up in the morning. It's too late. We're all tired. Let's go. And he listened to people. He didn't judge. He didn't force anyone to do anything they didn't want to do. And I have tried to emulate that. And so, like when I get, I'm my school. We get a lot of freshmen come in. A lot of them are coming straight out of high school where they were the top dog in their high school, and they come in and like they want to work all night. They're like, can I come into work at 6 o'clock? I'm like, no, I'm going to be home with my family at 6 o'clock, and you're
Mhm.
going to be working on your homework or chilling out in your dorm. Or they say, like, Tech Week's coming up, and they call it Hell Week, and I'm like, no, we don't call it that.
It's
Um,
a common phrase, but it really should never be like that
yeah,
anymore,
I
especially.
try not to get too hung up on semantics, but I hate that phrase because if Tech Week is hell, then someone's not doing their job.
Mhm.
And so I see it as it's my job to make sure that all the pieces are in place for Tech Week, that it's not hellish. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, we may work longer hours than usual, but it's where the magic comes together. I love Tech Week, and I want my students to love it, and I want them to look forward to it rather than dreading it. And
Definitely.
because I've been on the other side of that equation far too many times, and I've seen people just loathe what they're doing. And I love the theater. I go off in class all the time. I teach stagecraft, so I'm like nuts and bolts and flats and platforms and stuff like that. But every now and then I'll go off on a tangent about how primal theater is and how it's one of the most universal things all humans do, going back to pre-language, people just acting out the hunt around the fire. We all do theater, we all love theater, and it shouldn't hurt.
Mhm.
Yes, I've had just about every injury you can think of, but nobody should get broken, nobody should get and nobody should die because of what we're doing. And that is a top down thing,
Mhm.
because there were times I worked a couple of union gigs. Florida's a right to work state, and that's a whole other discussion. But I did work a few Yahtzee calls in my career. I've mostly been freelance or in educational theater. Um, but there was one where they sent me up into the rafters, on the trusses. Didn't ask me if I knew what I was doing. Just put me up there, and now this was back in the '80s, and I'm crawling around on this truss 40 feet off the ground, no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Uh, and I didn't go back the next day. And that kind of torpedoed my chances of working with them again. But I was like, if that's what you're going to do to me, I'm not going back. But too many people don't do that.
Mhm.
And too many people are afraid to watch out for themselves. Uh,
Mhm.
and I don't let my students hurt themselves. I don't let my students grind themselves down. Now, when they're not looking, I'll do it to me because that's the way I, I kind of come up through it. And the show has to happen. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's just I'm not going to let them get hurt. I'm going to take the bullet for them. But even I have my
Mhm.
limits now, and at the age of 60, my limits are a lot lower than they used to be. But
Definitely.
as leaders, we have to stop this lunacy of just go, working at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that's when people get hurt, and that's when the show doesn't, when the set isn't put up safely, and that's you get diminishing returns, and that's where I've seen it a lot better now, but I think there's still
Mhm.
too much of that attitude of we have to get this done. You'll have time to sleep after opening night, and that's just not right.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. All right. Now, Jody, I'm scrolling up. Where did you go? There you are. All right. What do you think? What role does leadership play in mental wellness?
I think that, again, from a children's theater point of view, from a producer director of children's theater, the most important thing, and this is probably true of all theater, the leader can do is treat each person like an individual, get to know them individually, get to know what their quirks are, what their needs are, what their anxieties are, to bring out the best in them. One thing I did love and working at Heather Wayne's is that we had a month in August where before we had auditions, we had audition workshops, and it was 2 days a week for a month. And I could teach acting skills, I could teach movement skills. We had all this education based stuff, so I could get to know these kids and what they were capable of doing. And one thing I did with them this last time was a personality monologue, and so they had to write a monologue that showcased their personality, their life, what was important to them, their likes, their dislikes, their family, whatever. And it let me know where they were coming from so that I knew who needed that time out in the hallway for a minute, or who needed to be driven, or what each person needed. So being able to take the time, and that's the problem is, oh, we got to audition, oh, we got to hurry, oh, we got to do this, oh, we got to do that, and you don't get to know your people. Connection is the most important thing. So if you've got a leader who is connected to the people that they're working with, that's who you want to work with.
Definitely. All right. Now, Jim, I know you work in the college. How about for you? What do you think?
Yes to everything everyone has said here. I just have to give a couple of people shout outs. Jen, thank you for commenting or complimenting my parenting style for raising a finance major. I don't know what happened there. And Alyssa, very few things in the world make me madder than college students who have to sit around at rehearsal. So I'd like to apologize to you on behalf of the universe. But, one of the things, and Rick has been talking about this in a really interesting, eloquent way, this idea of the professional expectations that are put on those of us who do theater. And it kind of goes back to, my hang up about identity. But I think there are a lot of folks, and I think we do it to ourselves, but I also think there are a lot of external forces that are acting upon us that expect us to do those all-nighters and work these crazy hours and all that sort of stuff. There's kind of a societal expectation of us by folks who might not know how this stuff works. And I have always been a believer that professional theater that can be a 40-hour week, and sure, we may have some stuff at the end where we have to work a little extra and make sure the costumes are sewn or the lights are hung. But, that's every job in the world where sometimes it gets busy. But I think getting it out of that almost, this is kind of a contested word, but this kind of fetishization, basically, that theater is somehow something, outside of the norm. And the expectations are different, and they're not. They shouldn't be. We should get our time off and paid leave and all of the things, and we should be able to have lives outside of the theater. And yeah, I just think that there is a lot of cultural expectation, and boy, we can get into the capitalism of it all some other time. But I think that's a real thing that we all need to be aware of.
Definitely. Well, I know we've briefly talked about this or mentioned it, but I did want to talk about burnout, because it is something that is so prevalent in the theater and performing arts industries. So Alyssa, I would love to know, like, what are some of the common causes of burnout that you've experienced or observed, and how do you recognize if you're starting to feel burned out, and how do you address that?
Yeah, I absolutely experienced burnout. I think it can happen really frequently, especially if you're on the running a theater side, and especially for, I think, community theater. I've worked in some professional roles, but the main majority of my experience is in community theater. I have been doing my theater company. We've been going for 9 years. Our creator team sort of broke apart, and I was like the last founding member standing. And we had one person who was doing like kind of a part-time role in our very last show. I had 4 people lined up to be my assistant director. All of them backed out. So I ended up producing, directing, stage managing, and then helping build half of the costumes for our final show, which was 12th night. And we set it in like the Southeast Asia. So we're having to like custom build like saris and all sorts of insane stuff. Plus like my set builder didn't show up half the time, and so this is like again community theater environment, so we're all like spending our weekends out there on the lawn because it was an outdoor theater, like constructing our set from scratch. And then this show was just like, it is a miracle it happened, because just all of these disasters kept happening, and I was dealing with it completely on my own. And what ended up happening was I broke out in a head to toe stress rash. Like my whole body broke out in hives. It was horrifying. I was having to like work from home while I was at the theater sewing costumes. It was a nightmare. And I realized that show was like the culmination of my whole life was running that theater company. Like every weekend I was having to be there. I did go to this is a little thing, but there's a big art festival here in Atlanta called the Dogwood Festival every April. I had not been to it in 12 years because it was always like the weekend or the weekend before, like a couple weekends out from our show. There's just little things like that, having to negotiate Mother's Day, Easter, big things. Like I don't get to spend time with my family during these times. Like my niece and nephew were very small. I didn't get to see them that often because I was at the theater. Like my whole life revolved around it. And especially the fact with like community theater, we're doing it for the love. We're not doing it for the money. No one's getting paid. It's all volunteer hours. So I think it's very, very easy. Like, so I can't remember who said it earlier, but someone said like, it becomes part of your identity. That's part of it. It's like, oh, my life is my theater company. And that became super unhealthy. And it kind of took literally my body rebelling against me to say, you need to stop. And we ended up folding the company. Like we were in a great position, like we didn't have to, but I was like, I cannot keep
physically
this
do this anymore, or mentally do this.
And I took like 3 years off from theater because I was like, I just can't do it anymore. And now I'm very cognizant about like building in time before or after I do a show, because I know it's going to be stressful. And so giving myself that break in between. Yeah. And I think that's part of it, is like helping recognize if other people, like seeing that stress reaction starting in other people, like if you see their personality is starting to change, they're getting short, or they look super tired, they don't feel like they're present. I think that's those signs that we all have to be cognizant of and make sure we're reaching out and saying, hey, do you need a break? Like what's going on? How can we help? What can we do to help have you able to be here and perform, but still keep you safe?
Definitely. How about you, Rick? How do you deal with burnout?
Burnout's a real problem for the tech side. When I was freelancing, you just took whatever gig you could. In fact, what I was talking to a friend of mine who's an AEA stage manager, but she doesn't work for a specific theater. And I was talking to her about this panel tonight, and I was wondering if she had anything to share with me. And she's talked about last year she worked 48 out of the 52 weeks at like 12 different theaters, and she eventually learned to build in downtime for herself.
Mhm.
and to stop working, and to, when she was in between shows, to take a few days or a week or whatever and just don't do anything except, watch TV and knit. Um,
Mm.
but I know a lot of us, I was really bad about it. I did not, my downtime was substances and TV. But um, then I don't know how more in depth I need to go into that. But then I
I think we've got it.
um, but then I went into the Air Force for 4 years in a
Mm.
complete lapse of judgment. But when I got out, I went back to the theater and found that stuff I had like hated before, like running cables and stuff. Oh, I love doing this now because I couldn't do it for 4 years. Um,
Mm.
but I also realized that I couldn't push myself that hard. And
Mhm.
I had to learn to take time off. And by time off, meaning actually just taking time off and not thinking about what's the next show, or, designing another gig while I'm not working on this one. Um, and it kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier about like not doing the all night work calls anymore. I don't let my students do that now.
Mhm.
Especially when I get the ones that come in from performing arts high schools and stuff, who that's the way we did it. We worked all night, and we had weekend work calls. Only if I'm really behind do I call people in on a weekend.
Mhm.
Other than tech week, of course. But if things have to be really bad for us to work a weekend, or I go home at 5,
Mhm.
and so do my students, because I'm like, you guys have classes, you have learning to be human beings, and
Mhm.
we don't need to be working on this all night. And
Mhm.
I find it to be much less stressful now. We've never had to postpone an opening night. The set may not always be done by first tech. There may be some wet paint on the show when the first audience comes in, but
Mhm.
everybody is in a much better place mentally.
Mhm.
And compared to how things were for me when I was at their age, when I was in there, we that just wasn't heard of. In the 40 years I've been doing this, we had one postponed opening night, and that was because the 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 scene shop, the set design got changed at the last minute, and they couldn't get it done in time. So we canceled opening night, but it was only by like one night. That's the first time,
Mhm.
that's the only time that's ever happened in my entire career. Uh, but it doesn't hurt as much now.
Mhm. Definitely. Definitely. Well, how about you, Jody? Do the kids get burned out, or
Some of
you
them
know?
do, and I just tell them lay off a semester or do whatever you need to do. I got burned out because I was trying to do two theater companies at once, and it
Mm.
was a lot. I used to do Odyssey of the Mind, and I would do 3 teams at a time. I've always been someone who likes to do a lot, but I now have fibromyalgia, so I can't physically do as much as I want to mentally. And I was ready to quit at West Hall, the Spartan Performing Arts Academy, after this year. And it seems like just when I'm ready to quit, we do the show, and it just keeps you going. So once you run once the show is up and it happens, then you're like, okay, it gives you that energy to go back and do more. So but with my physical health, I decided I just can't. In fact, what would have been cool was my principal had created or got the county to create 2 periods of theater for me that we didn't have. It used to be it's always been an after school program, but I was just to the point now where it's time to retire, and so
Mm.
decided that I just needed to retire public school, try something different. Not sure what I'm going to do next as far as that goes, but it's going to be fun to do this startup because it's going to be a performing arts school for all ages, and
That's awesome.
something that I can do and direct and bring people in and let them be creative and do what they want to do. So, but yeah, burnout happens for sure. And I had one little girl. In fact, somebody said something about, I've been writing things down. She was at Junior Theater Festival this last year before last. She got all-star performance, so she got to go workshop in the summer and I forget which show they were workshopping, but she got to go workshop a junior show this summer. Oh, it was Between the Lines, the Jodie
Mhm.
Picoult. And she is used to being a lead, and she always would say, and she's always been my lead, and she would say, I don't want to be in the ensemble. I always want to be a lead. Like, she was the kind of kid that if she didn't get a lead, she wouldn't do the show. And there are kids like
Mm.
that. If they don't get a
Mhm.
lead, she's like, I'm used to being a lead. Well, when you go workshop in New York, you're working with kids that have been there since they were 5. And
Mhm.
this was her first workshop in New York. And so she was in the quote unquote chorus and did a lot of the sitting in the chairs in the back singing and not being on the stage as much. And
Mhm.
so she was upset with that. Her mom was upset with that. And she didn't understand that, and I think it was, who was it that said um, something about not, I think it was you, Alyssa, saying that moving from technical or moving from smaller theaters to larger theaters, moving from something smaller to something larger, all she'd ever done is elementary, middle school theater. So to go from that to end up going to New York and workshopping and thinking she was going to be the one that gets picked for everything. And I told her, don't expect that. Don't expect that. You're
Mhm.
brand new. You got to pay your dues. And she ended up leaving the school. She had just a hard time mentally,
Mhm.
and went to a different school. She was having a hard time with peers, with theater, with everything else. And decided, she even said to me last summer, everybody sees me as a theater kid, and that may not be what I want to be anymore.
Mm.
So it happens where kids get
And
burned out. I know another girl who was theater kid all her life, a friend of my son's and my daughter-in-law, and they're both in entertainment. He does
Mhm.
like Universal, and she's an entertainer at SeaWorld. She decided she'd been doing theater all her life, thought that's what she was going to do, and she decided she was at Kennesaw, in fact, for a little while, and then she just said, "I don't want to be on stage anymore," and now she's a flight attendant.
Yep,
So, yeah,
it happens.
mhm,
Definitely.
yeah.
Well, um, I'm sorry, Jody, I didn't mean to cut you off. Or did you have something else to add? I thought
No,
you were
no, I was done.
done. Okay.
I was, you have to cut me off
I'm
sometimes.
no, I don't want to put anybody
Oh no,
silence anybody
no,
before they're ready.
that was it for me. So we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, how about you, Jim? How do how have you experienced it coming from the collegiate level and also being, an instructor as well? How do you deal with burnout?
I, it's funny because the other half of my life, the academic half of my life, has these discussions about burnout all the time as well. Because there
Mm.
are, if you all know how it works, academia is also just a fire hose all the time of stuff coming
Mhm.
at you. So I'm a big I'm a big believer in burnout, and I know it pretty well. A thing that I really kind of had to come to grips with, because early in my career, especially where at Kennesaw State, where I've been for, this will be my 18th year, uh, when I started there, I happened to start about the same time as some people who are really kind of hard chargers. Like, one of the people who I started with, he'd started a year before me. He was a dance professor, and
Mhm.
he came in and he started a dance program, and we have one of the top dance programs in the Southeast right now. And he moved his way up the ladder and was dean for a while, and now he's the provost of the university, and a good dude. But there was a lot of anxiety with me kind of comparing myself to him and going, wait a second, I don't want to do that. I just want to, teach my classes and direct goofy plays and go home. And so, kind of putting stuff in perspective and think, it forced me anyhow to
Mhm.
sort of step outside myself and say, hang on, what do I need to do here? And that really did help me kind of not risk burnout, at least in those different ways. So yeah, the
Mhm.
idea of kind of thinking about what you want and being self-aware, I think that helps. And also, you have to just think some days aren't going to be brilliant. some days are you're gonna, I always use the metaphor, and one of my favorite things in the world is to get a room full of theater people together and talk about sports, because the blank looks are real. But I always think sometimes when you watch baseball, they pull the pitcher in the second inning because he doesn't have it. And
Mhm.
some days you're like that. Some days you're like, I didn't have it today. But I am fortunate in my position where I get another crack at it tomorrow. The class I teach today may not be the most brilliant transformative class in history, but you get through, and then we'll see what we can do tomorrow. But just kind of embracing the reality of it and thinking, yeah, it's not all going to be great. It's not all going to be genius, but do the best you can. So that's kind of how I negotiate that and try to fight off burnout. I don't know how well I'm doing, but I'm giving it a shot.
Definitely, definitely. How about you, Jen?
Well, I was absolutely terrible at dealing with burnout to the point that I was the full-time costumer for a theater for the season while I was while I was carrying 3 college classes and working a 40-hour a week sales job, and I literally had a stroke. I blew my brain out. And after
Wow.
that,
Mhm.
because when you're sitting in a hospital bed at 3 a.m. realizing you have broken your human suit and they don't give you a spare, you learn a little bit about recognizing burnout and when to see it ahead of time. And I think I'm in such a happier place now because I did one very simple thing, and I practiced my self voice, how I talk to
Mhm.
myself. And when I would catch myself being rude, sorry, I have this emotional support cat and he's coming up because I'm talking about this. Um, so he might come in the camera in a second. But anyway, I would talk to myself as though I were talking to my best friend. And if I dropped something, I would treat myself like I wouldn't yell at my friend for dropping that after she just had a stroke, for God's sakes, you know? She's going to drop stuff. I'm not going to give her glass because obviously she's in a plastic sort of state right now. But and I used to joke cuz I've done acting and I have played a zombie in some short independent films that no one will probably ever see. But playing a zombie, you learn how to shamble and fall. And so after my stroke, I was so unsteady. I was like I said, I know how to do this though. I'm trained in this. I know how to walk like a zombie, and if every time I fell, I would use that to help me fall safer. It's amazing what
Mhm.
learning to fall for theater will help you as you get older in life. As a 55-year-old, trust me, I use that training a lot now. But it's mostly just how you talk to yourself. And if you tell yourself negative things over and over, then you're not going to be a very positive person. And you have to be on your own team. You have to be your own cheerleader because
Definitely.
especially in the arts, I mean, you're up against everyone else. And I
Mhm.
just went through a round of auditions and I did not get cast. But for
Mhm.
the first time, because this is the first time I've auditioned for a lead role since the stroke that I haven't gotten cast. Um, I was in the room, I made it to final callbacks and I was in the room and I saw the people that I was up against, and I saw them with a different eye this time because I was giving myself grace, and I knew a lot more of their backstories because Mama Yoda said, you got to know your people because that helps you understand them. And like one of the girls that got cast, I know she drove like 2 hours to get to the callback. I was so glad she got cast that it kind of by just doing a different mindset, it made it easier to deal with like not getting cast. Because trust me, yes, did I want the role? Yes. Would have had fun? Yes. But it just wasn't meant to be. And I'm so glad the people who got it did. And we need to have, I think, if I could show, and that's kind of my purpose in life is to try to help everybody realize this, that if we all work together and if we all support each other, I may not have gotten cast this time, but I'm going to get to see a great show. And I'm going to support the people that did get cast. And I'll still go and audition for the next one. And maybe I'll get it. But I know I have to up my level a little bit because we are all getting better every rehearsal, every audition. I'm up against
Mhm.
stronger competition because we are all improving together. And that's That's how I prevent burnout is I monitor my self-talk, I give myself grace, and I remember
Mhm.
to cheer for everybody around me as much as I cheer for myself. But I also make sure I'm cheering for myself.
Mhm.
'Cause I used to be the kind of person that I would hesitate to vote for myself, and I'm like I got after the stroke, I'm like, "If you're not gonna vote for yourself, like, who is?"
Mhm.
So
Definitely.
be your own cheerleader and honor your body's limitations, especially after the stroke. I have days I call them dropsy days where I just cannot keep anything in my hand. And trust me, I've heard from a lot of people you don't have to be a stroke survivor to have these days. They just come. You get amazing skills as you go through life. You level up and you learn how to like trip while standing still, choke on air, you know. I mean, you get amazing new skills as you go along, and you've got to like give yourself grace. And when something frustrates you, stop it. If it's
Mm.
hurting you, stop it. If it doesn't make you happy and you have the power to, stop it. And if you don't have the
Mhm.
power to stop it, begin finding out how you can and take the next step so that you will have the power to stop it
Definitely.
because you have to take care of your human suit. Because trust me, I'm speaking from experience on this one. I think all of us know this. You only get one, and the replacement parts are so hard to find. Uh, so that's how I deal with life these days.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, we are rapidly coming up on time, unfortunately. And I apologize. My emotional support cat just decided to jump up and cause a noise, so I apologize about that. But I did want to ask, as we conclude, what message would you like to leave with your fellow performers and production teams regarding the importance of prioritizing mental health in our work, whether it's professional or it's just a hobby? What would you like to do? And Jody, I am going to start with you. And also make sure you tell us where we can find you,
Where you can find me.
like online, in life, doing what you
Jody
love.
Shusoki on Facebook and Instagram. You can find my Ace Freely, who is my wonderful emotional support animal, at Instagram. He has a new account, Adventures with Ace, if you've been following that. Speakeasy.com, Speakeasy, SPEAKEYSIE. And also look on all the socials for that. What was the question? Before that? Oh, what
The piece of
Jen
advice you
said.
would give them.
Get rid of the toxicity in your life. I have spending the last 2 weeks doing that. I feel so much better. And even though things are happening, like I broke my ankle today, moving, I'm in a mentally good place because I've gotten rid of the toxicity. So if you're in a toxic situation, don't be afraid to leave it. Leave it behind because there's going to be something better going forward.
Definitely. And 1 second, I'm trying to unmute you. All right, and Jim, how about you? What would you be your one piece of advice, and where can we find you?
You can find me in my office at Kennesaw State University. No, we've got a really exciting season coming up this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Starting out with a really cool new play called Barbecue. Uh, Doing Pippin. We're doing an obscure English play called Macbeth. I don't know if people have heard of that one. And yes, I can say it. It's fine. It's
We're not in
fine.
the
I have
theater.
I have
We
tenure. It's
just did a
okay.
panel
I
about
can say
theater
it.
superstitions.
No, it's fine. No, I got it.
The Scottish play.
I have a dispensation. And then we're wrapping up the season. I'm directing a play about at the end of next year called Dog Act by Liz Duffy Adams, and it is a post-apocalyptic vaudeville. So
Wow.
another one of those things. So yeah, come up to Kennesaw State. We do some pretty good stuff. And I would say that don't forget how fun it is. I mean, nobody got into theater because everybody gets into theater because it's hilarious and it's fun. And don't make it more work than it needs to be. But also keep in
Mm.
mind, I love me a boundary, and have a life outside of theater. Have friends who are not theater people, and man,
Mhm.
watch movies and read books and go to stuff that is not theater related, because realistically, if you're going to be an artist, you got to have something to talk about, and nobody likes an artist who does nothing but talk about the art that they make, right? So yeah,
Mm,
get out there and be in the world and have fun and have empathy and have a good time and have a life outside of theater.
I love that. Definitely. How about you, Jen? Where can we find you, and what is your piece of advice?
Okay. To find me online, I have a podcast that I really need to figure out how to do now that they shut Anchors down, called Little Seed of Happiness.
Mm,
On Facebook, I am Look So Good, spelled SEW, because I'm a costumer. And then uh, other social media you can find by links on one of those. In person, um, during the week to support my crazy artistic life, I'm working with the Surrey Arts Council, so you can find me at the Andy Griffith Museum or occasionally at the Blackman Amphitheater if you're down for one of the summer concert series. Yes, I get paid to go to concerts now. I'm doing something right. I'm leveling up. Um, and I will be at AFO helping with their cosplay repair center this summer in AFO Orlando. And then I'll be at
mhm.
Dragon Con in the fall. I'm a volunteer with the Diversity and Speculative Fiction panel. And I play my ukulele and sing and perform songs as fairy godmother in between panels. So you can probably catch me performing if you're in that area. And I'll be performing at the Carolina Renaissance Fair for November and December, and that pretty much wraps up most of my performances this year so far. We got openings, we might have more. Um, and my message is to be the hero of your own story, because if your life is a book, most people will only ever see the cover. A few may read the blurb on the back, but only somebody who really loves you is even going to read or share a chapter or two of your life. You are the only one who will know the whole story. But write it as though you're the hero and as though you're going to
Mm,
read it someday. Because for all we know, that's what heaven is getting to read our story.
definitely. That is awesome. I love the way you put that. Um, Alyssa, where can we find you, and what is your piece of advice?
Yeah, I am Allie Jack on pretty much all of the socials. I know it's very original. Um, I also have a cosplay Instagram, which is alliejack_cosplay, where you can see some of my theater designs and my various cosplays. I'm also going to be on several panels for the alt history track at Dragon Con this year, talking about costuming, because historical costuming is kind of my jam. Uh, Jen, you and I totally need to hook up and chat. And Jim, I'm totally coming up to see some shows at Kennesaw this year. It sounds awesome. um, I think my biggest piece of advice is lead by example.
Definitely.
So if you are, don't be afraid to talk about your struggles. Like, this is something that I'm very lucky. I work at MailChimp here in Atlanta, and you can say, hey, I need a mental health day today, and no one bats an eye. So it's like one of those things, like, it's okay to be open. And I think the more you're open and saying, like, I'm taking care of myself today, this is something I need to do, other people will, you're making it more normalized for other people.
Definitely. Definitely. And how about you, Rick? Where can we find you, and what is your piece of advice?
You can find me. I'm one of the hosts on the Infinite Potato Alliance podcast network. We have all kinds of geeky shows. You can see the Star Trek and Star Wars stuff behind me. Uh, the main show I'm on is that Star Trek podcast where we talk about Star Trek. And my advice is the show must go on, but remember, we're a team. Theater is a collaborative art. And so no one person, well, except the director, but even then,
Except for the stage
the stage
manager.
manager.
No, I'm joking.
um,
The
it,
director likes to think he's in charge. No, anyway. Go
um,
ahead.
we're a team, so share the load. That was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn was delegate. Let people do stuff. It basically took me getting broken to learn to let people take some of my load. We all share we all make that show happen. It's a team. Let the team work.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. And again, I love that. As far as me, typically you can find me online at Dragon Con Theater and Performing Arts Lovers unofficial. That being said, I am actually going to be taking my own mental health break away from Facebook. Specifically, it's not a set date. I'll be starting next week and probably up through at least the first half of the week of June. I've decided every year I'm taking it away, and stepping away until Dragon Con. So you might not find me there, but I will be back. I love doing this. And as far as what we got coming up next, we are rapidly approaching our 2-year group anniversary. And
Yay!
we're going to be bringing back the very popular Battle Broadway. What is Dragon Con's favorite musical? Last year, Les Mis won. Will it be able to retain its title, or will a new challenger come up and defeat them? We'll just have to stay tuned. We are also rapidly coming up to Dragon Con itself. We're gonna in June. We plan on opening panelist applications for the panels that get approved. I don't have all my approvals yet. Track directors, if you're watching this, check your email. Help my mental health. I'm not good at waiting. But other than that, yeah, definitely check us out. Check us out at Con online. I will be working on uploading all of our back history of videos up until Dragon Con. Here during my break, I'm still going to be working because I'm just that type of person. Just no social media for me as much as possible. So until then, we'll see you next time. You'll have a
I had one more
one.
thing.
Mhm.
I forgot to tell you where to find me at Dragon Con. I am at the West End in Disability Services. So
Awesome.
come see me at Peach Tree.
Definitely, definitely, and I'll see you at Con.
How do I see all of you?
And until then, we're gonna say goodbye. Bye.
Thank you.